Hey everyone, so the National Book Award shortlist is going to be announced in a few days. So I thought I'd give you my review of all 10 books. I've read them all and I have lots of opinions, so let's get started. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. How are you doing today? As always, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, I hope you're safe, and of course I hope you're reading an amazing book or two or three or four. I love this time of year. I've read the Booker long list, I've read the National Book Award long list. I love award season and there are so many great books to talk about. I have to say both the Booker and the National Book Award did an amazing job this year. On neither list were there books that I was like, what the heck? I was able to read them all. I had no DNFs. I really loved both these lists, and the National Book Award knocked it out of the park. I had read 5 of the books before when the list was announced, and I read the other 5. And what I loved was there was a number of books that I actually had never heard of, and that is so exciting, especially when you love them as much as I do. So, without further ado, let's get started so I can give you my opinion. Get out your pen, out your paper, get out your Goodreads, however you keep track of your TBR. I hope that you have added most of these books to your TBR just because they were on the long list, but hopefully if you haven't, I will be able to help you today. So let's get started. I'm going to do them in the order that I enjoyed them, in reverse order, obviously, and then have sort of at the end what I would consider my top 5 shortlist. This is not the shortlist I think is going to be. This is the shortlist that I would love to see. So at number 10, I have Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. This is out from Scribner here in the United States. I know when I talked about this on the Booker long list review that I did, this is a sort of, for me, it's a book in 2 parts. First off, it is the story of a woman, an American woman, who is a spy who has been paid by a private company to infiltrate an eco-terrorist group in sort of the rural part of France that is thought to be planning to destroy some very important mining equipment. We find out that she originally works for the FBI, but due to something that she did in her past, she is no longer working for them and now is doing it sort of freelance. The other half of the book is actually her diving into the sort of philosophical treatise of the man who runs this eco-terror group and his thoughts on Neanderthals, the evolution of man, and sort of how that is sort of embedded into the part of France where the whole novel is taking place. I have read Rachel Kushner before, and I just, in a lot of ways, think she's too smart for me. I struggle to put all of the pieces of this book together, but I do recognize in a lot of ways that she has a mind that is very brilliant, a very sort of stark writing style. The characters do become very full-formed, though often confusing for me. This book I don't think particularly spoke to me, but I understand why people love it, if that makes sense. So at number 10, I have Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. That is out by Scribner here in the US. And all of these books are actually out in the US, which is always super exciting. The last book came out like the Tuesday after the long list was announced, which made it so easy. The next book I have at number 9 is All Fours by Miranda July. This is out from Riverhead Books. Now, this book was like one of the most anticipated books of the year for a lot of people. It is the story of a woman who is a writer, and she is kind of going through this like disillusionment with her life, with her husband, with her family. She's very connected to her child, but she is supposed to be doing an event. She lives in California, in Los Angeles, and she's supposed to be doing an event in New York. And due to a conversation that she has with at dinner one night with a group of friends and her husband, she decides that instead of flying, she's going to drive from LA to New York. Well, the part of the story that sort of starts the humor of the whole tale is that she makes it about 30 minutes to a little tiny town. I think it's called Monrovia, if I'm not mistaken, which I have actually been to. She stops in this little tiny town that has not anything like New York going on. And she checks into a hotel, and sort of the story takes from there. She lies to her husband, sort of lies to her child in regards to the fact that she continues to say she's on this road trip. When she is supposed to have gotten there, she says that she's in New York. But while she's in the town, she becomes infatuated, and almost, and I don't want to say romantically because I'm not sure that's exactly what it is, but she and this man who work at this rental car company start forming this relationship. He's married, and she's married, obviously, but they sort of start an emotional affair. And there's all sorts of aspects to this that I think you have to read the book to really sort of dive into. There's a lot of humor, some very, very dark humor. The thing for me that is that I don't know that this book and I spoke the same language. At times I was a little bit grossed out, to be honest with you. And I didn't really get sort of everything that was going on, but I did appreciate this idea of finding yourself and really trying to figure out what and how we live the lives that we choose to live. The main character is really complicated, and I thought that was very well developed and very, very what's the word I'm looking for? I just thought that was the strongest part of the novel for me, was sort of her introspection. And she makes some very terrible choices, and she is very, very easy to dislike at times. But in the end, I think that this book was very good. I just don't know that it was a book that was like in my wheelhouse. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I can talk about it. So that's All Fours by Miranda July. That's out from Riverhead Books here in the United States. So at number 8 on this list, I have Catalina by Karla, Cornejo, Villavicencio. I said it so well before. I have actually read Karla's first book. She wrote a book of nonfiction called The Undocumented Americans, was actually shortlisted for the National Book Award in Nonfiction a few years ago, and this is her first fiction book. This is out from One World, by the way, and I believe The Undocumented Americans was also One World. And Catalina is the story of a young woman, an undocumented woman here in America, who winds up coming over when she is young, living with her grandparents in New York. She and it's sort of the story of her life through college. She winds up getting into I want to say Harvard. All of a sudden, you know how your brain is like a minute. It's like she gets into an Ivy League school, but she doesn't know what's going to happen next because of her documentation status. And the book sort of just is sort of almost like fictional biography, because a lot of what Catalina goes through, Karla went through, and there's a lot of ties into the stories that if you've read The Undocumented Americans, that you'll see a lot of correlation between the two. I found the ending of this is the only part of it that I didn't, absolutely love. I think the writing is beautiful. I think the characters are well thought out. I loved the sort of the very complicated relationship that Catalina has with her grandparents. There is a decision made by her grandfather that I found heartbreaking but extremely real. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, I thought this was an amazing debut novel. I was really, really excited. I had not heard of it. Well, maybe I'd seen it, but I hadn't really hit my radar. So I'm really glad that the National Book Award got it onto my radar and made me read it. So that's Catalina by Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, and that is out here by One World in the United States. Okay, now we're getting into the books, by the way. My top 3, I think, are pretty set. Well, maybe my top 2 are set. 3 through 6, I loved all of these books, and it was very hard to put this list in an order. But the next book that I do have on the list is You're Dead by Sam Sax. This is out from McSweeney, and I have to tell you right now, I had never heard of this book. I think this cover, by the way, is gorgeous. It is next level good. And this book is one of those books that challenged me as a reader because it's not your normal type of narrative. Split up into many different sections, the story deals with a young man finding his queerness. It deals with a young man who is, very beginning we find out, is having suicidal thoughts and you know, I will say trigger warning for suicide. I will say trigger warning for abuse in a lot of ways. But this is a very poetic novel about very difficult topics. It jumps around a lot in regards to time. So if that is something that is difficult for you, it may be something that you have to sort of slow read. I don't think it's even available in audio, so I do think you have to read it, which I think is the most rewarding way, because the author does really interesting things. And I think you have to take your time with this book. He is an amazing wordsmith. And I was really, really blown away by this book. It's so hard to put these books in order, to be honest with you. I would be ecstatic if this book made the short list, because I think it's the most unique book on this list in what it does, what it tackles, how it tackles it. And I really want to say Sam is an author that I will read everything that they write from now on. I think they are brilliant in so many ways. So that's You're Dead by Sam Sax. Again, that's out from McSweeney. And it is so, that cover, right? That cover is gorgeous. Okay, the next book on my list, and I think this is number 6, if I'm not mistaken. Number 6. And this is where it becomes really hard, because I do not think this book will be left off the short list, if I'm being honest with you. But it is my number 6, and that is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. And that sort of speaks to the strength of this entire list, because I absolutely did love this novel. This is a debut novel. It is the story of Cyrus Shams. He is a young man. He lives in the Midwest. He and his father moved to the Midwest from Iran after his mother died in a plane crash. That's all I'll say about sort of the history. You get the family story in flashbacks. Cyrus is dealing with drug addiction. He's dealing with the death of his father. He's dealing with really trying to figure out what he wants to do next. He's a poet by trade. And he, at the very start of the book, which I heard Kaveh Akbar read out loud at a reading, and it's really quite powerful. So I would say, if you don't ever read out loud, read the first part of this book out loud. Just, it makes you slow down and really appreciate the genius of it. But what he decides to do after a miracle occurs is he decides to write a book about martyrs, different types of martyrs. And what that winds up doing is it leads him to Boston, I believe, where there's a woman who is dying of breast cancer, and as an art exhibit, she is sort of spending her last days talking to people. And this is where this book really sings to me, the conversations between him and this woman. Now, there are other conversations in this book, and really sort of dialogue with others is very much a theme and a narrative choice, because often he has dreams. Our main character, Cyrus, has dreams where he has sort of these three-way conversations by these very sometimes random pairs of historical people and himself. But when he sits down with this woman and really starts to dive in what it means to be a person, what it means to have faith in oneself, what it means to be a martyr, and what it means to sort of live life for what it is and to the fullest, is when this book really sings. I think it's a very strong debut novel. I really loved bits, a lot of it, and I'm really excited to see what he does next. He is a poet by trade, so I'm wondering if he'll stay in the world of fiction, if he'll go back and publish poetry. But Martyr by Kaveh Akbar is definitely a book I would say read, because I do think he is maybe a literary voice of the future. Okay, so now we are into what I think, if I could pick the short list, my top 5 books of this National Book Award long list. And let me tell you, all 5 of these books that I have in my top 5 are amazing. At number 5, I have the short story collection Ghost Roots by Pemi Aguda. This is out from Norton here in the United States. I was just watching Christopher, he's one of my Instagram friends, and he was like, he had been reading the book for a while before he realized that the lamb on the cover did not have a scarf on, which I thought was hilarious. But I will say, this is an amazing audiobook. Ghost Root is a collection of short stories set in Nigeria and in Lagos particularly, and it goes over a broad section of topics. And you always know, I always think it's really difficult to talk about short story collections. These, not like they aren't connected in the way some are, but here's what I will say. She tackles deep, meaningful topics. She writes characters that fly off the page in just a few short sentences. They all feel like they have this immense sense of resolution, and they just have this powerful touch. She can take just a few pages to make everything just come together. And she tackles family, she tackles relationships, she tackles place in the universe. She just tackles so many big topics in such compelling stories, and I cannot wait to see what she writes next. I hope she writes a novel, because I'd like to spend more time with a character, but this was a fantastic short story collection. I'm so glad Ghost Roots by Pemi Aguda made it onto the list. I don't read a ton of short story collections, but the National Book Award every year helps me out, and yeah, no, that one definitely is a amazing book, and if you like short stories, I highly recommend it. Okay, next on my list is sort of, technically I think the other short story collection in the group, but they are all connected in a way, shape, or form. So it's more like an interconnected short story collection. And that's Rejection by Tommy. And I'm sorry, Tommy, I am not going to try Tulathimutte. And I butcher that, I know, so I apologize for that. This is out from William Morrow here. My friend Ryan said, when I started this book, he's like, I don't think you're going to like it. And I knew why from the first story. I do not deal well with awkward. I don't deal well with TV shows that are intense, where the drama is like palpable. I don't deal with sort of that angst very well. It makes me very, very uncomfortable. This book is full of that. But it is also a brilliant satire on the idea of rejection in this world. Each of the stories do wind up connecting in some way. The first story, I think, that really, well, it is the first story, but the one that I keep going back to is called The Feminist. It is about a gentleman who is a feminist and the issues that presents for him as he tries to build relationships with women and others. I thought that the idea of rejection throughout these books was so well handled. I will say the last two short stories, one, I think it's called Metaphors, and then which is 16 Metaphors. That may have been a little bit too meta for me. And the last section is actually a letter, like a rejection letter written to him about rejecting this book from ever being published, which also very meta. But if you want to dive into the mind of a brilliant person while they tackle the idea such as rejection and the power and the sort of angst it can cause, not only for those being rejected, but those doing the rejecting, I highly recommend this. I will never forget Rejection by Tommy Tulathimutte. Oh, sorry, Tony. Did I butcher it? I'm sorry. But Rejection, your collection, your book. I am searching out his first book and super excited. Okay, at number 3, I have the shortest book on the long list, and the book that Ryan from Reads by Ryan told me to read the minute he read it, and that's The Most by Jessica Anthony. This came out in paperback here from Little Brown. I can't remember that a book that only came out in paperback making the National Book Award long list. Can you remember that? Please, in the comments below, if you've ever thought that this has happened before. I'm very excited to hear about it. The Most is very straightforward. It is the story of a marriage. The crux of it is that a man leaves in the morning to take his children to church. His wife is like, I'm not going to get out of bed. He comes home and finds her in the pool, which she does not intend to leave. We find out through through chapters back and forth between his point of view and her point of view, we find out that there are a lot of secrets in this marriage. She married him when she had a very promising tennis career. She was like a state level, college level tennis player. He sort of had that charm, but we find out that sort of their relationship maybe isn't everything that each other thinks. He is dealing with the fact that he has committed infidelity, and she's dealing with the fact that her husband really has no idea who she is at all. I thought it was brilliant. It's set in the 1950s. It sort of has that vibe to it, but sort of the back and forth, the way that the story unravels, when you find out why it's called The Most, is quite powerful. Everything about this, I enjoyed it. I read it in a morning. It's not long. I think it's like 144 pages, but it was definitely worth the time, and I loved it. So that's The Most by Jessica Anthony. Okay, so now we're on to my top two, which you should be able to guess. They were also in my top books for the Booker, so I am at least consistent. Number two, I have My Friends by Hasham Matar, out from Random House here in the United States. This is a book that's literally about friendship. And it is about three friends that are in the United States, excuse me, from Libya, and sort of how their lives intertwine. The book starts with our main character telling a story about one of his friends arriving, about to move to the United States. And then we sort of get these flashbacks of how these three people became friends throughout time. There's a short story that sort of spawns the relationship that is quite, I'm not going to even tell you because I want you to read it. But it dives into Libyan history, Libyan politics, the fear that people had in that country of what would be done to their families if they made certain decisions. And really it's about the complicated nature of friendship, along with the immigration experience to England, also with this desire to return home, this desire of family and space, and the complicated nature of that all. I thought it was really, really well done. I think that it's by an author that I had only heard of. I think his memoir was really well received, and I didn't know much about, but I really, really enjoyed My Friends by Hasham Matar, out from Random House. That is my number two pick. So you can guess that my number one pick for the Booker and my number one pick for the National Book Award, and I am perfectly okay if this book wins both awards, is James by Percival Everett, out from Doubleday. This book, I can't say any more about it other than the fact that I think it is a new modern American classic. I think that there is no way that people aren't reading this book in tandem with Huckleberry Finn for the rest of eternity. James is the Huckleberry Finn story from the point of view of James, the slave in the narrative, and it is complex. It is so well told. It's so readable for a Percival Everett book, but it really dives into the complex nature of that time in American history, and really sort of puts us on blast on how things aren't that different. Racism, classism, the complicated relationship between people trying to just keep their families safe and those who wish to do them harm. You don't need to have read Huckleberry Finn. I don't think that it is necessary in order to understand this book, but it does add a layer of complexity to the reading experience. And I think that Percival Everett is one of those authors that in the last few years has really started to get the recognition publicly that he has always gotten from readers and writers, and I'm really excited for it, and I would be 100% really, really happy if James won the National Book Award. So I hope that review did pretty well. Let me see if I can hold these all up without dropping them. There you go. Those are all the books. I have to say once again, brava to the National Book Award judging panel. This is a fantastic list of 10 amazing books. I highly recommend you read all of them, and I pretty sure you'll enjoy all of them for very different reasons. As always, if you are a return subscriber, thank you so much. I could not do this without you. If you are new to my channel, I say thank you very, very much for coming, and I really, really hope that you pick up all of these books. As always, I encourage you to read globally, shop locally. Until next time, I wish you happy reading. Bye, everyone.